Your dog knows something is wrong before you do, before the tears arrive, before the thought fully forms, before you have named the wound still moving beneath the surface of your composure. That is not instinct, that is not training, that is recognition. What if the animal sitting beside you is not responding to your mood, but to your light? What if the oldest companions humanity has ever known were shaped across thousands of years, not merely to serve us, but to find us, the real us, buried beneath everything the world has told us we are? This video will reveal why your dog may be the only being in your life that has never once seen the mask, and what that means for who you truly are. There is a moment most people with dogs have experienced, though few have ever found the words for it. You are sitting alone. The room is quiet. You have not spoken, you have not moved, and yet the animal rises from its place across the room, crosses to where you are, and lays its head against your leg with a weight that feels less like contact and more like acknowledgement, as if something in you had called out, not in language, and been heard. The philosopher and theologian Jean-Yves Leloup, writing within the stream of both patristic Christianity and Gnostic contemplation, described the human condition as one of perpetual forgetting, a consciousness fragmented from its source, wandering within matter like a dreamer who has lost the memory of waking. The Gnostic traditions that emerged in the early centuries of the Common Era placed this fragmentation at the very center of their theology. Within each human being they held, there burns a particle of the divine light, the Pneuma, the breath of the original pleroma, the luminous fullness from which all consciousness descends. This spark does not disappear when the human being falls into unconscious patterns, into social performance, into the thick architecture of ego and persona. It retreats, it dims, but it does not die. What this exploration proposes, drawing from Gnostic cosmology, depth psychology, and the neuroscience of interspecies bonding, is something that should arrest you in its simplicity. That the animal you live with may be the most accurate detector of your pneuma that you have ever encountered. Not metaphorically, not as poetic license, as a biological and contemplative reality that deserves to be examined with the full seriousness it has never been given. The kind of inquiry this video opens about the hidden nature of the self, about what it means to be seen at the level of the soul, is precisely what the Hidden Codex community was built to hold. Dear Seeker, we have just launched the e-book and audiobook, The Code of Sophia, the Gnostic Easter and the Resurrection of the Divine Spark as a gift for you, a practical guide to your inner resurrection. It is impossible not to notice how the world around us seems to sleep while we awaken. If you feel you have no one to share these truths with, the Hidden Codex community is your refuge, a place with forums, a library of gnosis, and meditative frequency audios. Join us. Links below. Begin with the gaze itself, because it is where the mystery enters. When your dog looks at you, holds your eyes with that quality of attention that has no parallel in the animal kingdom, something measurable happens in both of your bodies. Research in the field of anthrozoology, particularly work associated with Takefumi Kikusui and his colleagues in Japan, has documented that mutual gazing between dogs and their human companions triggers a reciprocal surge of oxytocin, the same neurochemical that bonds mothers to newborns, that underlies the felt sense of trust and recognition between humans who love one another. This is not a side effect of domestication. It is its deepest architecture. The wolf, from which the domestic dog descends across a process spanning somewhere between 15 and 40,000 years, does not do this. Wolves gaze at humans with what ethologists describe as a lateral assessment-based visual strategy, scanning for threat, for hierarchy, for information about what the human body signals in terms of dominance or danger. The wolf reads the surface. The dog has been shaped, generation by generation, to read something else entirely. Researchers like Brian Hare at Duke University and Alexandra Horowitz at Barnard College have spent careers documenting how dogs have developed a unique capacity, not seen even in chimpanzees, our closest genetic relatives, to follow human communicative intent, to read emotional nuance from facial expression, to orient toward the internal state of the human rather than the behavioral output. What domestication did, from a biological standpoint, was create an animal calibrated to perception of human interiority. This calibration is so precise that dogs can detect changes in human cortisol levels through scent shifts alone, can perceive micro changes in facial musculature invisible to other humans, can register alterations in gait, posture, and breath rhythm that signal emotional states their owners have not yet consciously identified. They are reading something that happens before the performance of the self begins. In Gnostic terms, this distinction is everything. The Archontic understanding of the human being, the false cosmological architecture described in texts like the Apocryphon of John, is one of surfaces and shells, of the material body as a kind of prison constructed to confuse and contain the luminous particle within. What most of the world perceives in another human being is precisely this: the shell, the social presentation, the constructed identity shaped by fear, by desire, by the need for belonging. Dogs, it appears, have been oriented towards something that bypasses all of that. They are aimed with biological precision at the interior. To understand why this matters theologically, it is necessary to sit with what the Gnostic traditions meant by the Archons, and to recognize how profoundly that concept maps onto the texture of modern life. The Archons, as described across texts including the Hypostasis of the Archons, the Apocryphon of John, and the writings that scholars like Elaine Pagels and Kurt Rudolph have spent decades illuminating, were understood as intermediate powers, neither fully divine nor fully material, whose function was to maintain the human being in a state of forgetfulness. They are not, in most Gnostic readings, malevolent in a simplistic sense. They are structural. They are the forces that make the veil feel like reality. They are the forces that make the mask feel like the face. Contemporary philosopher Byung-Chul, writing from a secular but deeply resonant perspective, describes what he calls the transparency society, a world in which human beings are so saturated with information, so constantly exposed to social comparison and digital performance, that interiority itself becomes inaccessible, and argues in texts like the Burnout Society and in The Swarm that the modern condition is one of self-exploitation disguised as freedom, a world in which the human being has become so adapted to external demands that the interior voice grows silent not through suppression but through sheer noise. This is the Archontic veil in contemporary dress, not chains, static, not oppression, distraction so total that the prisoner forgets there is a window. Within this context, consider what the dog actually does. The dog does not know your job title. It does not know your credit score, your social media presence, your reputation among colleagues, your history of failure or success. It does not adjust its response to you based on whether you are confident or broken in a given moment. The Gnostic scholar Stefan Höhler, working in the lineage of the Ecclesia Gnostica, wrote about the pneumatic human, the person in whom the divine spark remains sufficiently active to resist complete absorption into the archontic matrix of social identity. The dog responds to precisely this, not to who the world says you are, but to what you actually are at the level of presence. There is documentation in veterinary behavioral science, through researchers like Karen Overall and the broader field of applied animal behavior, that dogs in multi-person households will consistently orient toward the individual under the greatest internal stress, regardless of that person's behavioral presentation. A person suppressing grief while performing normalcy will find the dog beside them. A person simulating calm while experiencing internal fragmentation will find the animal attentive in ways the surrounding humans are not. This is the sixth sense, demystified, not supernatural in origin, but biological in mechanism, oriented toward interior states that social conditioning teaches human beings to disguise. The implication is uncomfortable and profound in equal measure. If the dog sees through the veil, if it is constitutionally incapable of perceiving you as the self you perform for the world, then every moment you spend in its presence is a moment in which the Archontic architecture of identity is gently, persistently circumvented. The animal is not fooled. It never has been. The depth psychologist Marie-Louise von Franz, working in direct continuation of Carl Jung's analytical psychology, wrote extensively about what she called the mirror function in intimate relationships. The way in which the people and presences we draw closest to us tend to reflect back to us the contents of the psyche we have not yet been able to see directly. Jung himself, in his work on the shadow, the repository of all that we have not integrated about ourselves, suggested that the unconscious contents of the psyche find expression in the world around us before they surface into conscious awareness. Projection, in the Jungian sense, is not a failure of perception. It is the psyche using the external world as a screen. The dog functions as a mirror of an unusual kind. It does not project meaning onto you. It receives you. And in receiving you without the filter of social expectation or linguistic interpretation, it forces into visibility what would otherwise remain submerged. Practitioners working in the field of animal-assisted therapy, a discipline with an increasingly substantial evidence base, have observed consistently that clients who struggle to access emotional states in conventional verbal therapy will often break through those barriers when an animal is present. The presence of the dog does something that language cannot do. It creates a field of unconditional reception that the defended self finds difficult to maintain its defenses within. This is what the Gnostic tradition called Anamnesis, the great remembering. The Platonic inheritance within Gnosticism held that gnosis, true knowledge, was not the acquisition of new information, but the recovery of what the soul already knew before its descent into matter. The trimorphic protanoia, one of the most luminous texts recovered from the Nag Hammadi library, speaks of the divine voice descending into the world, not to impose new truth, but to awaken what sleeps within the human being. 3 descents, 3 calls, each one attempting to penetrate the forgetfulness of embodied existence and remind the Pneuma of its origin. The dog does not speak, and this is precisely what makes it effective as a vehicle of anamnesis. Language, in the Gnostic and Hermetic understanding, is itself a tool of the Archons. The Poimandra, the opening text of the Corpus Hermeticum, describes the descent of consciousness into matter as a process that includes the acquisition of speech, a capacity that both connects human beings to each other and separates them from the pre-linguistic knowing that belongs to the Pneuma. The dog communicates in the register before language. It communicates in presence, in breath, in proximity, in the quality of attention it offers. It asks nothing of you that requires words. And in that wordlessness, something in you is allowed to be wordless too. There are documented accounts across veterinary behavioral literature and clinical animal-assisted therapy records of dogs undergoing behavioral shifts, increases in anxiety, changes in sleep patterns, altered appetite that precisely mirror the suppressed emotional states of their human companions during periods of concealed crisis. The animal externalizes what the human cannot yet express. It carries the signal in its body that the human body has learned to suppress. Marion Woodman, writing about the body as the carrier of psychic truth that the mind refuses, would have recognized this immediately. The dog is not mimicking your distress. It is confirming it, offering it back to you in a form you can finally see. There is a practice within certain branches of the Hesychast tradition, the Christian mystical current that sought inner stillness as the ground of divine encounter, called Nepsis, watchfulness of the heart. The practitioner learns to observe the interior landscape without immediately reacting to it, to hold the fluctuations of thought and feeling within a field of quiet attention that neither suppresses nor amplifies. What is being cultivated is not detachment, but presence, a quality of awareness so steady that the deeper currents beneath the surface of the mind become perceptible. The philosopher Simone Weil, approaching from a different angle but arriving at a convergent understanding, described true attention as one of the rarest and most demanding human capacities, a complete orientation of the self toward what is actually present without the distorting pressure of personal agenda. Weil connected this kind of attention directly to the sacred, arguing that genuine attention to another being was itself an act of love and a mode of theological contact. What happens in the ordinary moments of shared presence with a dog, the unhurried morning, the afternoon light through a window, the animal breathing beside you with its full weight of unself-conscious being, is something that participates in both of these traditions without belonging to either. It is silence that does not ask you to produce anything. It is presence that does not require you to perform. And within that space, which requires nothing of the constructed self, the Pneuma, the inner spark described across Gnostic, Hermetic and Kabbalistic frameworks alike, finds room to surface. The Kabbalistic tradition speaks of the Nitzotzot, the divine sparks scattered throughout creation, embedded within matter, waiting to be recognized and raised. The mystic's task, as understood in the Lurianic Kabbalah that Gershom Scholem spent his career recovering and interpreting, is the work of Tikkun, restoration, the slow, deliberate process of recognizing these sparks and returning them to their source. It is a cosmic project that takes place through every conscious act, through every moment of genuine attention offered to the world. The dog in this framework is not merely an object of our care. It is a presence that participates in this restoration, its unconditional orientation toward our interiority, its refusal to accept the mask, its persistence in responding to the pneuma rather than the persona, functions as an invitation to tikkun that most human beings receive daily without recognizing it for what it is. Every time you are forced by the animal's unfiltered response to acknowledge what you are actually feeling, rather than what you have decided to present, something in the work of restoration advances. This is what might be called the silent remembrance, a moment of clarity that arrives not through intellectual effort, but through the simple, insistent presence of a being that has never learned to see you any other way. It is not dramatic, it rarely announces itself. But it is the kind of gnosis the ancient teachers recognized as the most reliable, the kind that does not overwhelm the ordinary life, but saturates it with meaning so gradually that one day you simply realize you are different than you were. What would it mean to engage consciously with this dynamic? To enter the ordinary space of living with a dog not as the management of an animal's needs, but as a contemplative practice oriented toward the recovery of your own interior life. The suggestion here is not to impose spiritual framework onto a creature who asks nothing of our frameworks. It is rather to allow the animal's already existing capacities to do what they have always been oriented toward doing, and to remove from the human side of the relationship the habitual distance that converts presence into function. In practical terms, this means resisting the reduction of contact into task. Feeding, walking, training, these are necessary and good, but they are not the threshold of what the relationship makes available. The deeper work happens in the intervals, in the moments when nothing is required of either party, when you sit with your dog without a purpose, without a device, without the management of some other demand, and allow the quality of that wordless exchange to actually reach you, not as sentimentality, as data. What does the animal's presence make perceptible in you? What rises to the surface in the silence it creates? The Hermetic tradition, particularly in the tradition of Garth Fowden's scholarship on the Philosophical Hermetica, describes the contemplative moment as one in which the practitioner becomes receptive to nous, the divine mind that permeates creation and seeks contact with the human soul through every available aperture. Wouter Hanegraaff, in his comprehensive work on Western esotericism, has documented how this tradition consistently understood the material world as a veil that, under certain conditions of consciousness, becomes transparent, not destroyed, but seen through. The dog, for many people, is one of the most reliable apertures of that transparency. Not because it is sacred in some imposed sense, but because it has never learned to close the aperture it was shaped to hold open. In 2026, this matters with an urgency that the Gnostic teachers would have recognized immediately, even if the vocabulary would have surprised them. The fragmentation of attention that defines contemporary life, the architecture of digital saturation, the collapse of interiority into performance, the replacement of contemplative space with perpetual stimulus, creates the conditions that make the Pneuma not merely dormant, but genuinely inaccessible to many people for long stretches of their lives. The silence that the dog embodies, its radical indifference to every layer of the social construction that most human beings inhabit as their primary reality, becomes, in this context, something close to a medicinal intervention, not a cure for the Archontic condition, but a persistent daily reminder that the condition is not the totality of what you are. The Apocryphon of John describes the divine voice calling out to the human soul within the darkness of the material world. Not commanding, not overwhelming, but calling. A call that the soul can hear if it is quiet enough, if it has not completely surrendered to the noise. The animal beside you is, in its own biological and entirely non-metaphysical way, an echo of that call, a presence that insists, without a single word, that there is something in you worth orienting toward, something worth the crossing of the room. To receive that, genuinely receive it, rather than simply register it as affection and move on, is an act of contemplative courage. It requires the willingness to be seen at the level at which the animal sees you, rather than continuing to inhabit the level at which the world requires you to perform. And it is, in the Gnostic understanding, a small but genuine act of apokatastasis, restoration, return, the luminous spark recognizing itself through the mirror of a creature that has never known how to look at it any other way. What has been traced here across the biological record of domestication, the cosmological architecture of Gnostic theology, the clinical observations of depth psychology, and the contemplative traditions of both East and West, is a coherent and startling possibility. That the bond between the human being and the dog is not an accident of evolutionary convenience, not merely a story of mutual utility across millennia of co-survival. It may be one of the most reliable and persistent mechanisms through which the fragmented Pneuma finds its way back toward recognition. The dog does not know the Gnostic vocabulary. It does not know about the Pleroma or the Archons or the Nitzotzot waiting within matter for their restoration. It does not need to. It is calibrated with a precision that tens of thousands of years of companionship have refined to respond to the interior reality that all of those systems are attempting to describe. It finds the spark, it orients toward it, and in doing so, it offers you something that no philosophical system, no matter how luminous, can fully provide on its own: the wordless, embodied immediate experience of being recognized. That recognition, offered without agenda and without the capacity for deception, is a form of grace, not grace in the sense that requires doctrine to contain it. Grace in the older and more elemental sense, something freely given, unearned, arriving through a channel you did not expect and cannot fully explain. A reminder, daily and quiet and four-legged, that the light within you has not gone out, that something with ancient eyes can still find it even when you cannot. Before this video ends, a word about the other channel connected to this one, the Hidden Codex Studio. It explores complementary paths through the same ancient forest, and every visit, every subscription, there is a direct act of solidarity with this work, a way of ensuring that these voices, these texts, these questions continue to reach the seekers who need them. The link is in the description, in the pinned comment, and on the homepage. Your presence there matters. The person who follows something this far is not looking for entertainment. You are looking for confirmation of something you have always half known, that there is more in the space between you and the animal beside you than biology accounts for. if you feel called to ensure that this kind of knowledge keeps being made, that the flame of this particular inquiry keeps finding the people who need its light, the link to join this channel is below. You would not be subscribing. You would be standing guard over something rare, something worth protecting. Until the next descent into the hidden, carry the spark carefully.